Leave it to Ruckus to find the appropriate song for every conversation as we are rejoined by Mr. Richard Solomon, the Managing Director of Development Consulting Center, giving us some insight into what we're calling Industry 4.0, a world in transition. At least that's how you put it, because we're really continuing the conversation of AI and the integration into our society, the way that people embrace or don't. And on that note, we kind of have to backtrack since your conversations tend to continue from the previous one. The last time you were here discussing AI, remind the viewers of the situation locally, at least in the context of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, so I didn't coin the phrase Industry 4.0. That goes to the World Economic Forum. Really, it is moving beyond digitization to cyber-physical systems where machines become smart. Materials are smart. Roads, networks, the Internet of People and Things. And what we're seeing is that there will be a difficulty in being able to distinguish between cyber and physical systems. So in the Trinidad and Tobago context, I think we're in the early stages. I mean, I have some clients in the manufacturing sector, for example, who have automated entire lines of production, removed people from those lines, and redeployed those people, I should say that, because I know that gets some people's backs up. But yeah, redeploy those people. But I think we are in the early stages in Trinidad and Tobago because I like to say the world is not one space when it comes to these kinds of issues.
But we are very much integrated into worldly things. And so when you say there will be a difficulty in distinguishing the cyber from the physical, give a little bit more detail there, because my brain says, well, how, like...
Well, think about calling into a call center and someone or something answers the telephone. Now, usually you can distinguish, and sometimes the systems will tell you, I am a this, I can take whole sentences, and then you speak to it and you know it's a machine. That is going to get so good, I believe, and it's predicted that you won't be able to tell the difference between whether you're talking to a human or you're talking to a so-called machine. So that's an example, you know, where the machines become more and more human-like. And I mean, I can't escape the example of Tesla recently and their robot. They saw that robot, and I think the price point is like $30,000. And I said, well, if I can get a robot that's going to cut my grass and clean my drains and do the dishes and whatever, sign
it's
me
worth
up.
the investment, right?
You know what I mean? You know, so of course you can tell that is a robot. Can you imagine one day that you can't? That'd be interesting.
And we were seeing beforehand that that's what's going to happen in the sense of them, the robots, learning how to meet our needs, so to speak. And so, of course, there comes in the conversation of what people in Trinidad and Tobago, the world, but Trinidad and Tobago specifically, are most concerned about. Now, when we were talking, we had a place of privilege, if you will. We have access to information, we are much more comfortable in digital spaces, but is Trinidad and Tobago ready for that sort of integration?
Well, it depends on what you mean by ready. There's some elements that we don't notice, and I think you were talking about this, and I think it's a good point. When you get a feed of information on your social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or now TikTok, it's a good example. How is that feed created? Well, no one is sitting down saying, oh, Richard likes this, I'll send him more of that. There is a system within machines that are able to now look at, or is able to look at, this is what Richard likes, let's feed him more of that. He doesn't like this, he doesn't like that. It's literally already there, but it's invisible. You know, you just know you open Facebook or whatever it is, and this is on your, you know, on your For You page. And so there's that type of integration, if you want, which is kind of behind the scenes and doesn't affect us obviously. It affects us, but not obviously, because most people don't think about it. It's just there. However, when it begins to affect us obviously, this is where the issue comes up.
Like what?
So, for example, if the port workers, those who drive around those big machines, you know, if we had a machine that could think, see, sense, and do the job of those port workers, then that now says, well, we don't need as many people or any people to do certain things. Is that taking away my job? Well, that's really not the way to look at it. There's another way to look at that, but it's more, this is now in your face.
Right.
You know, you now have this obviously in front of you versus something that sits behind.
A little bit more subliminal.
Yeah.
Let's look at the other way that we should be looking at it, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Can this take away my job? That's a real question.
And that's it's a real issue. So the port workers on the eastern seaboard of the United States that went on strike, and I think I spoke of this last week, the entire eastern seaboard was shut down because they were saying, well, machines don't have children in universities and they don't have families. But the reality is that the machines are going to be more efficient. They don't take sick leave. They make far less accidents. Self-driving cars are safer than humans. Self-driving planes are going to be safer. Self-driving trucks are going to be safer because they are not affected by the emotional issues that we are affected by.
Right.
So they are going to be safer. They're going to be more efficient. So theoretically, backtrack, Richard, practically, yes, there are some jobs that machines will do, and they will do better than us. Like a tractor, for example. A tractor does digging of the dirt, tilling of the soil better than I could ever do it. Yeah, so that's a reality. But we've done this before. We're going to see it again. I think the bigger question is which jobs are going to be mopped up by machines, and quite possibly in a good way, and then which ones are going to be created. And to me, that's where we need to point our attention. If I can now see that the movement of goods, for example, within a space like a warehouse is going to be better done by a machine, and I am part of that system that moves goods, then my question has to be, what other skills do I need to begin to develop? So that when those other jobs are created, which they will be, because we always do that, we can look back in history, we see it.
Industrialization.
When that happens, then I will be in a position to be able to now adjust and surf this wave of technology.
This is you, of course, talking as a very proactive employee, and we may have some employers who may do that thought process for their employees. Let's upskill, let's retrain you. But really and truly, what I'm hearing is that people should begin to be concerned then.
Yeah.
The concern not necessarily being despair, but just making a plan altogether.
For this entire year, most of my conference talks were around this thing about employers beginning to upskill and get people ready for redeployment. And this is not something that's going to happen in a week or a month or even a year. This is going to take quite some time. But remember, people don't stay in organizations forever. So people move on, people retire, people go on with their lives, they go to other organizations and so on. So that's one thing. So there is that. I shouldn't say people don't stay forever.
I was just going to say, culturally, we do long service
Some people do stay for a much longer time.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember as well, before I get to the individual part, is that remember, this is not going to suddenly, I mean, if you're a carpenter, for example, or you're an accounts clerk, an accounts clerk is a good example, and you do data entry, that's not going to disappear tomorrow. You know, over time, organizations will deploy those things, and there'll be an adjustment period. At the organizational level, organizations are saying our number one strategy is to reskill people through training, etc. So organizations are, in fact, taking that on. They have to. People just are not just going to disappear. And I can't help but say, in a Trinidad and Tobago situation where a quarter of the population, the labor force, works for the government, it's not expedient to just say, well, let's just pull this thing and then go this way. It's not expedient, it's not practical, nobody does that. So we don't need to run to the hills and say the sky is falling. Run to the hills. That probably don't make sense anyway, but you get the point, right? So that's on the organizational level. At the person level, I think people overestimate, let's go the other way, I think people underestimate the capability of humans to change.
Beautifully said. And very, very, very positive.
And it's very true. As humans, and I can look at my lifetime, we've gone through some major changes in the way technology is deployed, in the way we bank, in the way we communicate with people. There was a time, if I had to call my eldest brother, who lived in the United States, I couldn't call from the phone that was not in my house because we didn't have a phone in the house. So I would head down to the exchange and pay and go into a little booth and call.
Wow. I was just going to say, I was in the era of like the companion card, perhaps, so I could use the phone at home. But yes, there were
Or when we got a phone in the house, I put the first one in, it was, he would accept the charges. And then we're now at a place where we've got smartphones. Lots of people don't even make calls anymore. But we've adjusted to these new ways of being. So humans, despite our emotional reaction, because that's what it is, it's a, oh my God, what's going to happen to us? Despite that, we do have an amazing ability to adjust and to surf these waves. And that's going to happen. the world is not just going to suddenly change, it's going to happen over time, but also we have an amazing ability to adjust and to be able to create new and better ways of being.
That certainly puts a positive spin on things, considering that, as you rightfully say, a lot of the dialogue has been, am I going to lose my job? Will my employer be helping me to, well, surf the wave, as you say? And so Trinidad and Tobago sounds poised with great human resource management to do exactly that, ride the wave in a positive way.
It was a statement, it wasn't a question, but let me take it as a question. In the Caribbean society, we are still lagging when it comes to human development. So that has to also be taken into account, that we do have some work to do in terms of developing people to really take full advantage. Because remember, Industry 4.0 is a people-powered thing. Eh? The machines are machines, that's all they are. Okay, let's go ChatGPT in the few minutes that we have left. If you don't ask a good question, you get a bad result.
Of course.
Or you get a less than happy result or great result. The ability to formulate a better question is where the skill is, right, in the case of ChatGPT, or many of these large language models. So now we have to look at people's ability to get their thoughts aligned so that they can ask the right questions. If you remember iRobot, my responses are limited, you must ask the right question.
I'm really glad that you used that particular example, because there are a bunch of people who didn't see it just yet and they're excitable about that Tesla release. So maybe we will revisit things like that, that teach us that ultimately we the people still have the power. And the capability that you've reinforced in this conversation this morning is beautiful. So I thank you for that, Mr. Solomon. But I think this is another conversation that will be ongoing as we continue to explore a world in transition. As far as where we are as a people, Trinidad and Tobago, we will ride the wave positively. I'm putting it out there. You said it was a statement, but it is mine.
Okay.
We're going with it, and for now, we're going to take a break and come back with more here on the Now Morning Show.